Welcome everyone to today's Alteryx Weekly Challenge walkthrough. My name is Alvaro Gonzalez. I'm a Tableau and Alteryx consultant here at the Information Lab in London. And today we're going to be walking through challenge number 465. The data for today's challenge is about the Great British Bake Off, so it's just a bit of fun. And something I wanted to point out before we jumped in is that today's challenge has 4 tasks in total. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break up this challenge into 2 videos, and this is part 1. So be sure that after you watch this video to check out the second part to get the solutions for part 3 and part 4. So I'm just going to jump into Alteryx Designer. I've got it open here. And we're just going to go ahead and kind of take stock of what we have before we jump into the tasks. So as I mentioned, the data relates to the Great British Bake Off. And for the challenge, we have 5 data sets. The first one is a baker's data set, so it includes information about all the participants. We have an episodes data set, which is about each episode and their theme and so on. We then have a standardized theme text input tool, which we'll see how we can use that later to solve one of the challenges or one of the tasks. We have an outcomes file as well and a seasons file. So we'll kind of go through these as we go through the challenges and see if we need anything from any of the data sets available, but it's just good to know that they're there for now. So what I'm going to do just to kick off is we're going to read the first task to see how we want to get started. And so I'm going to just zoom in here so everyone can see. The first challenge is to calculate the youngest, oldest, and average age of bakers for each gender. And so initially, or what comes straight to mind is that we're dealing with the bakers here, and we've just read out the data sets, and there's a data set for bakers, so that's the first thing I'm going to have a look at. And other things that stand out to me is that the tasks ask for the youngest, the oldest, and the average. These all sound like aggregations to me, the youngest being a minimum, the oldest being a maximum, the average being an average, usually a mean. And then also we're being asked for all of these for each gender. And so all of these kind of things that are being highlighted in the task are very much pointing to the fact that we need to use a summarize tool for this task. And something I want to do before we go ahead and start using any tools is just look at the data, see if we have what we need before we solve the task. So I'm going to make sure that my data is available to view, and I'll do that by running the flow. You can do that by clicking Run in the top right there in the blue button, or you can click Control R on your keyboard, and that should run everything. You can see that it is running at the moment, and it's all good. So now I can click on the tool, on the output anchor, and we can see that we have the data available here to view. I'm going to zoom in really quickly, just so we can take stock of the data. Whoops, too far. And we can see here that we have a total of 5 columns. The first one is the season number. The second one is the name of the participant, the baker. We have their age, their gender, and then an image to their link. If we remember, the task is asking us for the youngest, the oldest, and the average age of all the bakers. And it wants us to group this by or return the output by gender. And we can do this by using the summarize tool. So just looking at the data and taking stock, I can kind of confirm that kind of what we'd want to do is use the summarize tool here to get the desired result. Now, part of the task, and is something to always keep in mind when you're doing these weekly challenges, is we're being asked to do some aggregations. And aggregations, especially in particular the average in this case, requires that the data type for the column that we're using, or the field that we're using, it requires that it be a numerical field. In this case, what we'd like is, because we want the average of the age, we want that as a numeric field. You can check the data type of your fields by clicking on the metadata toggle. So if I click on here, we can actually see that age is a v string. It's a variable string. And so that's going to prevent us from using the summarize tool properly to get the result that we want. And so what we're going to have to do first is we're going to have to use a select tool. Select tool usually sits in your favorites palette here. You can see it on the top of my screen. It also sits in the preparations tab here. You can find that just over on the right hand side here. I'm going to click and drag the select tool onto the output. You can see that it's attaching automatically. And in the configuration pane, we can see all of our fields, the data types, the size. We can rename, we can do various things in this tool, but for now, all I'm interested in is changing the data type of the age column to integer. And I'm going to do that by clicking on the drop down and changing that to integer 32. And I'm going to run the flow. I'm going to click on the output anchor. And now we can see we're in the metadata toggle here, in the menu there. We can see now that our data age is now integer 32. So it's an int 32. It's perfect. It's just what we want. So next thing is we want to use that summarize tool that we spoke about, and this will allow us to hopefully get the expected result for the challenge. The summarize tool is usually in your favorites palette. It's here in this case. And it's also available in the transform tab, and you can see that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click it from there, and I'm going to drag it beside select tool. And what it does, it gives us a list of all of the fields in our data set, and it shows us the data type. The task mentions that we want the results to be for each gender. And so that gives me the hint that we're supposed to group by or aggregate to the level of the genders. So what I'm going to do with that information is I'm going to click on field, gender. I'm going to add an action, and I want the action to be grouped by. So that's going to make sure that all the results in the flow are aggregated to the level of each gender. And then it's a matter of getting the youngest, oldest, and average ages, and we do that with the age field. So I'm going to click on age, I'm going to add the minimum, which will give us our youngest. It's still highlighted, I'm going to click add again, our max. And then I'm going to add another one for our average age. So that's hidden in the numeric menu down here at the top, our average. And then I'm just going to rename these just because it's what we're being asked for, to make it more descriptive. Youngest baker, oldest baker, and then average age. I'm happy with that. And great. I think that I'm happy with that. I'm going to run the flow. And something I'm going to do is, when I think I now have the expected outcome, is I'm going to use a browse tool to to finish my flow. You can get the browse tool. It's usually in the favorites tab as well, on the left-hand side here. It's in the in and out pane tab as well, on the left-hand side here, browse. I'm going to click and drag that on, and then I'm going to run the flow. I think I've set everything to deliver my expected result. I'm in my metadata tab here at the bottom, so I'm going to just change back to data, and this is what the result is. We can see now that we have our gender here. We have then youngest baker, which gives us the minimum age for each gender, the oldest baker, which gives us the maximum age for each baker, and the average age. There's a little pop-up just blocking the bottom one, but that's there. So that's perfect. That's kind of what we are expecting as an output. That's what the task is asking for. And we're just going to verify that with this kind of solution expected output that is provided in the challenge. So I'm going to just click on the browse tool. And for the most part, it looks correct. So we have our gender. Let me zoom in so you can see. We have our gender column. We have our youngest baker, oldest baker, average age. We also have our number of bakers. This isn't something that's explicitly called out in the challenge, but we can go back to the summarize tool and we can add that there. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back into the summarize tool. And if you remember, we have our baker column here, which kind of gives us the participants' names. And what we can do is we can use the summarize tool to count each of these, and we can add it to our configuration pane here. So I'm going to click on baker. I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to add count distinct. You see we have count distinct baker here. I'm going to rename it to match the expected output. So I think it was hash for number of bakers. And another thing is in the expected output at the end, that new number of bakers column was the second one. So while having it highlighted, I'm going to use these little arrows just to place it second here. I'm going to then just click on the browse tool and I'm going to run my flow. And we're going to see that change now once it runs. Perfect. We have our number of bakers as well as our youngest baker, oldest baker, and average age. Something I like to do before finishing up the task, so that's the solution, we've completed that, is just make sure that it's all, it's basically to put them all in a container. You can do that by clicking anywhere on the canvas and dragging your cursor over the three tools. You can right click any of them, and here in the options you can see add to new container. I'm going to do that right now. So right click, add to new container. I just like to call the container, you can see up here we can configure the name. It's highlighted in blue currently as container 78. I'm going to just call it task 1. And this means that now we can use this container to kind of move the tools around on the canvas, and it just neatly shows the task complete there. So next, let's tackle task 2. I'm going to zoom in for you so we can have a look at this as well. So the task is asking us count how many episodes were in each season and determine which season had, I gotta scroll in a little bit here, which season had the fewest episodes. So we can see that the season had the fewest episodes. So we want to count how many episodes were in each season and determine which season had the fewest episodes. And again, if we look up at our data sets, we can see here we have an episodes data set which has information about each episode. So let's have a look at that and see if it has everything that we require. So I'm just going to click on the input tool and I'm going to expand the window a little bit and zoom in. You can see we have the episode air date, we have a column with season number, episode number, which are two columns that just straight off the bat I think would be very useful for this challenge. Again, it might require some aggregation here so we can group by season and then count the episodes. I think that's going to be our approach. We also have some more data relating to the theme of the episode, the signature, the technical, which I believe are different tasks within the episode. But I don't think they're relevant for task 2, so I'm just going to skip them for now. So like I mentioned, we are looking to find which season had the least amount of episodes. I mentioned that we can use the summarize tool here to summarize again. In this case, we're not doing an average, we're counting, and for that you don't need to convert these numbers to these numbers down here to integer data type. So we're going to leave them as they are. No select tool is required here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the summarize tool, which sits in the transform tab, and just here is the third from the right hand side. It may look different for you. I'm going to click and drag it beside the input tool. So we have all of our fields here. So we want the number of episodes per season. And that, like the gender in the previous task, suggests to me that we want to group by season. So I'm going to click on season here, add an action, and click group by. And what we want is to count the number of episodes. So I'm going to click on episode, I'm going to add, and I'm going to do a count distinct. I'm going to call this count because the name automatically applied to it is just very lengthy. And I'm going to just run the flow just to check what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to zoom in for you guys. As you can see, we now have a column with season, so it has a season number and then the count of the number of episodes. We can see that most seasons have 10 episodes, but except for season 1 and season 2, which is typical of TV shows. And what the task is asking for is for the season with the fewest amount of episodes, which in this case is season 1. So how can we isolate that row that I can show you here, this row here, that has season 1, 6 episodes counted. The first thing we can do is we can use the sort tool. The sort tool sits in the preparations tab. It's also in the favorites tab. It is here on the right hand side. I'm going to click and drag it onto the canvas. And what I can do with the sort tool is I can sort this count column to start at 6, go to 8, 10, and so on. So I can order the column ascending. And I can do that in the configuration pane here. So I want to sort the count column, and I want to do that ascending. And I'm just going to run that and show you what that looks like. Perfect. So you can see here we have our desired result. Season 1 at the top with the fewest episodes, Season 2 with the second fewest, and then the rest of the episodes combined. And then finally, I think because we're asked for the season with the fewest amount of episodes, we want to then only show the top row in this data set here, and we can do that using the sample tool. And the sample tool sits in the preparations tab up here, and you can see it here on the right hand side. I'm going to click and drag that after the sort tool. And in the configuration pane, you can see we can choose what we want to do with the sample tool. The default option is to select the first n rows, and we can define what that n is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the n here in this little window to 1, because we just want the top row. And we're going to, in this case, because we believe that, well, I believe that after this we're going to have that single row, which should be the expected outcome. I'm going to do a browse tool, and I'm going to run the flow. And we should have our desired result. And here we have it. So we have the season 1, count 6, which should be the expected outcome. Let's just double check that on the right hand side. So if you scroll over task 2, you can see the solution is season 1, count 6. So that's task 2 complete. And finally, I'm going to just add a container to the last task tools, or the flow. I'm going to add a container. I'm going to do the same thing and just label it task 2, just for a little bit of organization and neatness. But that sums it up for task 1 and task 2. Catch you guys in the next episode, where we'll go through the solutions for task 3 and task 4. Hope to see you there.